Today we're going to leave the prettiest, most boring city in the USA and we're going to travel to the toughest city in the country. It's home to 8 million people, with 300,000 people moving there every single year, but a very similar number also moving out, and in recent years more people have left than have moved in. I lived there for 13 years until 6 months ago. This is my first time back. I'm going to introduce you to a slew of friends, all to answer the question, what are the tough lessons that the toughest city in the USA can teach you if you pay attention? Vamos. Let's see what we can learn.
And I got Bob here. Bob's company manages $500 million.
If he's going to hit me that hard, it's lucky that he got me here. If I can make it there, I can make it anywhere.
Do what you want, as long as you make money.
It's like I can't get deterred by if I see something that's gonna shake me, because I'm always gonna see something that's gonna shake.
Right up there is where I had one of my last and biggest meetings in New York City.
I'm glad that that's how I spent that chapter in my life.
This is Union Station in Washington, D.C. You can see it's absolutely beautiful, impeccable. It's very unlike most other stations that I've ever been in the USA. So we're going to catch that 925 Acela. The Acela runs from Washington, D.C. up to Boston. It goes through cities like Baltimore, Philadelphia, New Jersey. Does New Jersey even have cities? I don't know. New York, Connecticut, just a state, and then up to Boston. Does Connecticut have cities? Connecticut and New Jersey are states that don't have cities. That's my theory. Anyway, on this train, it can be quite interesting because there can be a lot of people involved with politics. There can be politicians, there can be lobbyists, there can be diplomats, there can be tourists. In the middle of winter, I'm not so sure, but let's go see. Out there in that whole suburb are some of the most powerful and some of the richest people that this planet has ever known. This is the perfect metaphor for this country. AMTRAK is federally owned, but it's for profit, yet it doesn't own its own train tracks. It rents them from a bunch of other companies. I can't imagine the grifting that goes on in this situation, but this country is complicated. So you've got a few minutes before we need to board. I'll take you on a quick walk. I was here a few months ago. I remembered it being really dingy. It's actually really pretty. I don't know if it's the lighting or if they've cleaned it since I was here. A lot of the shops seem empty. They were empty quite a while ago. And yeah, a lot of the cities, the major cities in the US, there do seem to be a lot of shop fronts that don't have a lot of people. Although it's funny, I was just on a bus coming in and I was surrounded by government workers. Basically on a bus in DC, early on, you get government workers, maybe people who work in education, and you get people who don't have homes, homeless people. And these two guys behind me were talking about what's happening with politics right now and how the new government's trying to gut all of their services. They were talking about how their parents you can just get another job, and they're like, there won't be other jobs. And also a lot of the companies or the organizations, they're freezing hiring anyway. So a lot of people are panicking. I don't know how this is going to affect the city. Obviously, it could become even more boring, more of a ghost town, but there's a lot of panic. I mean, the people behind me were saying it's been the toughest couple of weeks for them in a very, very long time. Look at the ceiling. It's kind of like honeycomb. I want to touch it. I want to lick it. Tasty. Seating. I haven't seen this in this station before. It's both off-brand and on-brand for this country. It's off-brand because whenever a company kind of thinks about people in a considerate way, that's not the American way. The American way is about squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. It's on-brand though, because you have to pay to get access to this quite nice place to sit. One of the things you'll learn about the USA is that it's very good at squeezing people into uncomfortable situations, gaslighting them about how uncomfortable those situations are, and then having everyone fight for their place in the line. Another perfect metaphor for this country, and definitely for New York. As much as I like to beat up on the US, it's been good to me, and I do like that Acela. It's not cheap. I'm not paying for this though. I'm going to do some work in New York, and I thought I'd take you along with me. It is comfortable. It's about 3 hours. I believe the train goes up to speeds of about 150 miles per hour. So, let's have some fun. I don't know if people are going to want the camera on them. There are going to be powerful people on this train, I know it. Let's see if we can have a conversation with some people. It's car 5, we're going to car 6. This poor guy's next to me. I think I'm in there.
Getting in there?
Yeah, man. So you know how I said there's some powerful people on the train. I got Bob here. Bob's company manages $500 million. Bob, we're going back to New York.
Yes, heading back to New York right now.
How long have you lived there?
Lived in New York for about 35 years.
35 years. And what do you do for a job?
So I run part of our institutional investment business.
Right. What do you do for a job is one of the most American questions you could ever ask, and you're allowed to ask it before you ask someone's name, because you need to work out whether you even want to know the name of the person. So I'm exploring like the lessons that people have learned living in New York. You spend a bunch of time living in Manhattan while also working in Manhattan.
Yeah.
What did you learn?
So I work in a industry that is super duper competitive, and me being a type A personality, I love it, and I love the competition. And basically over time, what I've learned is that you realize very quickly things that you're good at and things you're not good at. So it's important to figure out the things that you're not good at and to work on them. Because if you don't work on them, you're not going to get better and you're not going to advance in your career.
Just on this, there's a softness in your voice. It's partly because we're in this train, but I know there's an actual aggression in that energy, right? Because your industry and that city is super cutthroat. So you just said that in a very nice way. Can you say that in a more aggressive way?
Yeah, there's very low tolerance for underperformance in this industry. You know, you have one bad year and typically you're probably shown the door.
I'm in my 40s, you're a little bit older than me, not that much. In the 40s in corporate America, a lot of people don't have much time left, but they don't realize it until they're in their 40s.
Yeah.
Reaction?
I totally agree with you. I'm a little older. I'm in my 50s, and now it's really hit me hard where I actually have said this, like, I wonder how many more summers I have left on this earth where I'm going to be able to be physically able to enjoy them. Mm-hmm. So it just puts your perspective in life changes in all these different stages, you know. Mm-hmm. But 40, in the 40s, it's important. I think those are the years where you need to, at least in my industry, really be, continue to ramp, go up the hockey stick in terms of, elevate your game, in terms of advancing your career and income. And then you get to your 50s and you see the finish line, and either they're going to throw you out or you got to retire.
By the way, what does someone who's a type A and someone who's an optimist have in common?
Type A and an optimist. I think an optimist is a dreamer. A type A, which a dreamer may be able to achieve what they're seeking to achieve. A type A, I don't want to say generally will not fail, but they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that they achieve their goal.
Wrong.
No.
What a type A and an optimist have in common is every time they speak to someone, they have to tell them that they're a type A or an optimist.
You are using your green light amplifier.
So team, as you know, this is my first time back in New York in 6 months. I was actually out of the country when my family moved to DC, and you know how much I love DC? Not much. But I thought, who else would be better to speak to than a mate that basically moved to New York around the same time I moved there. He was a bit of an inspiration for me moving there, because I asked him what he was going to do with his career, and he said he wanted to move to New York, and he gave me this idea. His name's Julian Cole. What's up, Jules?
Thanks for having me on.
How long did you live in New York for?
Somewhere between 7 and 9 years.
And why did you go there?
Yeah, I moved to New York because I was working in advertising, and I really thought that New York was like the big leagues. I was in Sydney and thought, oh yes, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere.
Why did you leave?
COVID. My wife and I were Australian, we're on visas, I was kind of freelancing. I didn't have proper health insurance, and my mum was like, you guys better come back for a little while. So I moved back to Australia, and we thought it was only going to be for 3 months. We had the almond milk still in the fridge.
What are some of the lessons that you learned in New York?
Life goes in chapters. Whether you want it or not, your life is going to move on. And so the lesson I learned is I lived in New York 2 times, or set up in New York 2 times. The first, I was like 25 years old, and it was just a playground. It was like adult Disneyland. There was just so much to do. The second time I came back, I was probably 30, 32, 33. And what excited me the first time, I just wasn't interested in it anymore. Like, when you're 25 years old, you can drink 11 Finity beers and have no hangover and go to work. And what I realized was that's what the city's good for. If you've got that energy to go out and, don't have hangovers. Where when I came back the second time and tried it, I just wasn't interested in those things anymore. And that chapter had closed and I was trying to capture something that wasn't there. So I realized my body and my mind, I guess, had grown up, but I was still chasing something else. And you've got to try to live in whatever chapter you're in. But that was the very first time I realized it doesn't all just go and peak.
Was there a lesson that you think took a long time for you to really absorb and do anything about? Something that you were really resisting, but deep down you knew it was true and that New York was really trying to teach you?
Obviously, it's a super stressful city. Especially with work, it's a very intense work environment, high energy, a lot of passionate people. And I was holding that stress in my body. I didn't know it at the time because I kind of feel like I'm a very positive person, and I also feel pretty chill all the time, like in very stressful situations, I won't let it feel like my brain doesn't get too stressed. However, what I realized later was it was actually just being held in my body. So I had lots of lower back pain, and I'm not a woo-woo person by any stretch, but I realized that the lower back pain was actually from all the stress that I was carrying. And so I've started to realize the relationship between my mind and what's happening up here, and especially stress, and how it kind of permeates out into my body.
Was it worth it?
100%. I loved it. I still do. I look back so fondly on that chapter of my life, and I'm like, there's no better city. It's actually interesting, like watching on TikTok, like there's a couple of creators I watch who are in that still life stage and are Australian and have moved to New York. And I'm like, oh my God, that is what I went through. And, your story's not, you feel like it's quite unique at the time, but it's not that unique. We all do the same things. I'm glad that that's how I spent that chapter in my life.
And then if we search for one big epiphany, is there a particular way that New York changed you?
I was given permission in the city to be more me. That was dress how I wanted to dress, follow my passions wherever they went, and be really super ambitious in work. I had people in New York who kind of pushed me along on that journey to kind of come out of my shell a little bit more.
What does someone who's a type A or someone who identifies as an optimist or a positive person have in common, JC? They have to tell everybody every time they talk to them. This is 12:30 on a Wednesday. It's pretty busy. Lesson number one with New York is it's very seductive, but you don't necessarily want to be seduced by it and live here long term. I'm telling you that. This place will make you look up in the sky and make you wonder how people build the things so high, in particular this building. At one point, the Empire State Building was the tallest building in the world. And what that's doing to us is it's triggering this reaction of awe. AWE, that's how I say it, I have an Australian accent. It triggers this reaction of awe in us, which tickles the brain. If you step into a big church, you enter a big office with a big desk and a really tall person, you're out in nature, that triggers awe. Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, is someone worth looking up if you're interested in finding out about it, because New York will trigger awe in you a lot of the time. Yes, you can burn out here very easily. Some of this stuff can stop to impress you, but when you come back, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But living here, you'll pay a price for that awe. New York, stop it, you're playing your tricks on me. I literally felt my body release. I am more relaxed here than I have been in the past few months in DC. I've just been so bored and miserable and unhappy. I feel slightly happier here, but I have to remember how expensive it is to live here, how stressful it is to live here. But it will definitely play tricks with your mind. All right, let's see what a $174 a night hotel looks like. It's the middle of winter. I'm sure there are times of year when this place is 2 to 3 times more expensive. Here's where I'm staying. The Draper. Coincidentally, like Don Draper from advertising TV shows. I don't really watch advertising TV shows. I don't know if any of you are doctors and you go home and you watch TV shows about doctor. I grew up largely working around advertising, publishing, media, etc. That's so funny. Staying at the Don Draper. Is it possible to check in early? P-O-L-L-A-R-T.
P-O-L-L-A-R-D?
Yep. Yep. Yes. That's a good joke. I like it. Let's check out the room. Tenth floor. This is a slowish elevator for New York. Maybe I've just been spoiled. The buildings here are tall. Slow elevators can just ruin your days. Broken elevators can really affect you. All right, you ready to see what a $174 a night hotel gets you in New York in the middle of winter? Let's go. Hello. Okay, this is a little bit bigger than the hotel I stayed in the first time I ever visited New York, which was 14 years ago, right around this week. It has a little bit more area than this place that I stayed in the first time I came here. There's probably a little bit of a view that's not always common in New York. This is what that view looks like. Kind of cool. And got a screen here. A little bit of mood lighting. I don't mind a little bit of mood lighting. Bathroom. Nice and modern. Totally fine. I know for a lot of countries, $174 a night is actually quite a lot of money. This is New York, and there are definitely going to be times in the year where this would be 2, maybe 3 times more expensive. All right, next stop, I'm going to take you to Roosevelt Hotel, the first place I ever stayed, and I'm excited to tell you the story about it. There she is. That's the hotel where my entire New York journey started. Oh, there's another thing that New York's doing to me with its tricks. I walk at New York speed and I'm listening to other people walking and I'm noticing the rhythm and the pace of the walking. I didn't notice that when I was living here, but now I'm like, I'm in rhythm. Rhythm with the city. I'm not gonna fall back in love with New York. Not unless you cancel winter, cancel how expensive it is, but you know, it could happen. All right, here's the hotel. So despite how tough this city is, millions and millions of people over decades have seen it as a place to possibly have a fresh start. Despite crazy odds, despite how expensive it is, despite how violent it is or has been and can be, people have come to the city and landed in places like this, a little fancy, right? Or it was. Or they've landed in much rougher places and they've tried to get out of this sort of situation. This hotel I stayed about 10 days in, 14 years ago, almost to the week. It was the middle of the winter. The seasons, climate change, everything was a bit different back then. For the first week, I was too scared to get on the subway. So I walked everywhere. I walked tens and tens of miles, which is tens and tens and tens of kilometers. And it was really, really interesting. I had about 10 meetings. I told myself I wanted to do good ideas at scale. And so I met a lot of people. From that day on, I had probably 5 to 6 years of culture shock. I still get it a little bit. And I think if you work in the creative industries or in any profession where you get paid to use your brain quite a lot, if you move to New York, you have to adapt to the brains here. It's quite a conservative city. I find the US generally quite conservative. And even if you're doing creative work, you could be working in an organization that's way more conservative than the organizations that you're used to back home. And it takes a little bit of time to calibrate. One thing I remember from the interviews that I did is if you've been around a little bit, so I'd been here for 12 years, I think it's an incredibly tough city to start in unless you have a mega rich family just straight out of college. And unfortunately that has hampered the hiring pool of so many industries in the city. Like you basically have to be mega rich to even get an internship here. But I walked around, had all these interviews. I found most of the interactions quite transactional and conservative in a particular American way, a way that I can pierce now, but back then it was a bit odd. And maybe they weren't used to dealing with that many Australians, although there has been a corridor of Australians making its way over here for a very long time. But in a lot of these interviews, people said, look, if you don't want to take a job from us now, let's stay in touch. And if it doesn't work out at the job that you take, let's chat. There's a transactional nature to it. There's an openness to, we're doing a deal and it might not work out for you, or it might. This hotel has now become a home for immigrants largely, possibly some people who need shelter, who are local as well. And they're all trying to have a better life, right? And I know there's been a lot of negative press about this in the US and around the world, about how New York's falling apart, San Francisco's falling apart, etc., etc. New York's not falling apart. There's just a lot of people here. It's a tough city, super expensive city. Think about the cost of healthcare. If you want a decent education, you want to get your teeth looked at, it's just terrible. It's ridiculous and it's super predatory. So when I see people coming in and out of this place, I don't know how long they're going to be here for, but I know that most of them have come here, possibly because they're fleeing, but most of them actually want to achieve something somehow. They just need some people to believe in them. That's what I believe anyway.
Check this out. Right up there is where I had one of my last and biggest meetings in New York City before deciding that I was not
Right for corporate America. I was in a meeting with the global CCO of the company that I was at. They were doing hundreds of millions of revenue at the time. I think they were trying to get to $1 billion in revenue. It was a big company, and there were about 8 other people from the client, Fortune 500 company. You can guess it in a handful of guesses if you know this area and if you know which companies are in that building. I was in this meeting for an hour. I'd never dealt with them before. I have no idea what anyone said. I was 5 years into my time here. I thought I'd almost culturally adjusted, but I did go to work every day just feeling kind of either gaslit or super confused by the language that people used. And I think there are a bunch of lessons here. One is believe what America does, not what it says. There's research about this. You come here and you think it's a democracy and everyone will welcome your ideas. Most decisions get made behind closed doors and it's very top down. People are so aware of their own titles and importance. They love using their titles in meetings to establish who's got the most importance, the highest status in that group. But also, I think in corporate America, the language. What words are you using? What dictionary did you all study growing up? I don't know who studies a dictionary, but what are you freaking saying in your meetings, corporate America? It doesn't make sense. It's so painful, especially if you love words like I do. The third lesson that you'll learn in corporate America, especially in New York, is you have to be careful about how honest you are. On my first day in the job at Saatchi, which was my first job in New York, I'm going to take you there later, the head of HR said to me, because you're an Australian, you have to be careful of what you say and who you say it to. You Australians are direct and you say the wrong things to the wrong people. And you know what? Fuck yeah, we do. New York's trying to do a number on me. He's trying to seduce me. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
So I think this is one of the buildings that Julian worked in.
I'll let you in on a local tip. Here's how you walk when you're a tourist. People come up to you and you talk to them. Hey, what's your name? And they try to say some stuff. Here's how you walk when you're local. Look, I sort of get this, but a lot of locals see Times Square as a little bit of a tourist hellhole. I know fancy young people who say, I never go above 14th Street. And that's how you say it. You don't say, I never go north of 14th Street. You don't say north, south, west, or east. That's a rookie mistake. You say up, down, downtown, cross town. But really, if you look around, surely this is not a tourist hellhole or hellscape. Surely this is like Mecca, but for capitalism. It's like the capitalism heaven. It's a place that if you believe in capitalism, surely you want to die and be reborn here. Unless you're a billionaire and you want to be reborn in your bunker in New Zealand away from all the poor people. So I'll give you a lesson. Never be too good for Times Square. I gotta tell you, there have been days when my energy's been a little bit down, I've not been feeling great. I'll come for a walk through Times Square. I'm not above that. It energizes me up. All these people are super excited. This could be the biggest trip of their lifetime. They've managed to save up enough money to spend a night, 5 nights in New York, maybe in a hotel, maybe 2 hours away by train. You don't know. But coming to New York is definitely a meaningful experience for so many people. So don't be too good for Times Square, my friends. Don't be too good. So I would say that one of the most important ideas that's in the culture of the US is this. It's the idea of the most important individual. It's essentially a religious idea. I think it made its way here through the Calvinists, maybe even the Puritans. The idea is this, that if you're successful, you're important. But to become successful, you have to be important. And what that means is the most important people get into heaven,
And the people who are not important, the people who are not good, not of good character, they won't get into heaven. And that leads to certain decisions in society around how much people with wealth, with resources actually care about people who don't have them. The idea of the most important individual comes across in business in a lot of different ways. One is just with the ridiculous titles they've got here. Everyone's got a big title, and then there's all this layering such as EVP, SVP, VP, and so on and so forth. It also will come out in meetings where people will use these titles. You might come here from another city or another country, you'll be in a meeting and someone will introduce you in a way that they can control who you are, the narrative of who you are, so that people don't think that you're better than who you are. It also means that in business, optics matter. I freaking hate this word. I only really heard it in the last couple of years of my career here. People are worried about how they're looked at. Now this makes sense because there is research that suggests that a lot of people who get ahead in business do have sociopathic, maybe even psychopathic tendencies. That's a small group of people, but the representation of people with those tendencies overrepresents in senior positions in business. However, it leads a lot of people to realize that how they're perceived for doing the work versus the work that they actually do matters more. And I think that leads to a culture of mediocrity. It's basically a game of how little work can I do while getting the most credit for it. And that can lead to some really strange behaviors. Now, this used to be a pretty rough and wild area, red light district, prostitutes, etc. Not so much anymore, not on the streets at least. But one of the reasons that there was this wildness to the city is because of the Dutch. The Dutch were at the heart of the business culture here for a very, very long time. And for what I understand, their attitude was, do what you want, as long as you make money. So this is one of my spots. I worked out here for 2 years. And one thing I learned here that was reinforced multiple times, hundreds of times around the city, is that New York does not give a fuck. There used to be a building here in the streets. You know, in the pandemic, when people could put up buildings outside their restaurants and cafes, I was sitting there a few months ago. I was doing my work, minding my own business. This lady is probably 3 feet away from me, a meter away from me. She opens up her phone, calls someone, puts it on speakerphone, and she starts to have a therapy session on her speakerphone next to me. And she was talking about her husband and how she cheated on him, I think multiple times, but it's his fault really. My body started to shudder, and then I made this video.
I became someone that I rely on really not. Maybe someone that reached out to me like me.
10 seconds, 1.8 million views. Let's give a little bit of context to New York does not give a fuck. Because New York actually can be pretty friendly. Most people want you to leave them alone at most times, but most of this country, but especially New York, is available for a chat as long as you're not too crazy, right? Now, if something happens to you, you get into an accident, some bad stuff happens, people around you will probably help. They probably will. Now, if you investigate New York does not give a fuck, what that means is there's also a sense of liberty, a sense of freedom kind of baked into it because of the Dutch. We don't care what you do as long as you make money. So a lot of people do come here and they find new ways to be. Me, I got into yoga. I started to read a lot of books about writing. I'd published a magazine. I never thought of myself as a writer. But I went to Strand Books, picked up a whole bunch of books about writing, and then I wrote a book. These are things that, yeah, I could have done in Sydney, but Australia has a small population and there is a conformist vibe in Australia, despite the fact that, yeah, I know you think we're all fun and you party with us when you travel and the guys have weird mullets and moustaches and everyone's a laugh at 3 a.m. in the morning, but there's still a conformist nature to Australia. It's a small population, it's not a big market. So if you come here and you want to take advantage of that New York does not give a fuck energy, try to make something of yourself. You can find peace in New York. It is a bit greener than you would think. Central Park especially, obviously. It is concrete and noise and people, but there are peaceful spots. So speaking about that New York does not give a fuck energy, 6 years ago I came back from India. I did an event there. I was doing podcasts at the time. I still do podcasts at the time. And I thought I'd just do a walk and talk. I thought I would just walk around Central Park, talk into a microphone. I'd get questions from Instagram and Twitter and places like that and just speak. As an Australian, we have a thing called the tall poppy syndrome, which is if you think you're too good, mate, if you get too tall, we kickbox you at the legs and we cut you down. So I felt really stupid doing this. I was talking into a lavalier microphone and just talking out loud. I would just walk around. But honestly, no one cared. A few people would look and wonder what I was doing, especially if I had the microphone. But no one gives a So if you come here, you can take advantage of that energy where no one really cares. And you know what? You'll come and go just like I have. You might leave a little imprint on the city, but the city will forget you. You'll come, try to do something of significance. You'll try to become a significant person. 99.999% of people will leave totally insignificant, barely left a scratch on the city. People will build over you again. They will concrete over you again. But while you are here, and maybe more than many, many other cities in the world, you can get into all kinds of nooks and crannies, different communities, different groups of people. There we go, I can see it, I can see it. This is the place where I wrote most of my book. I'm going to show you where I wrote most of my book and tell you about that process, that journey, that magnificent print and ink-filled adventure. No, let's go in. Posh chai latte, don't judge. So this is Birch Cafe. I used to live here. Literally. I'd come in at 8 a.m. in the morning. Used to be more tables, probably fit 20 to 30 people in a small space, and that's New York. And I got to tell you, if you're in a cafe in New York and nearly every table is taken, but you got a bag on the seat, bye-bye bag that goes on the floor. I get your seat. That's just how it is. But I used to come up here and then write my book, 400 pages, would strap in about 8 in the morning, write till about 12 or 1, 3 to 4 days a week for quite a while. And just right there is where I wrestled a guy, put him in a rear naked choke because he was having an epileptic fit. I had no idea what else to do. He kind of just hit the ground, his head smashed on the floor. And I got down into this weird rear naked choke position without choking him. And I just started to say, I got you, man. And I was patting him. I got you, man. I got you, man. Because I used to hold my babies and I knew how to calm them down. I didn't say I got you, man, to them, but that's what I did. Let's have a chat with Joseph, who made this beautiful coffee, by the way, and see what he's learned from New York. This is Joseph. Tell us how long you've been here.
I've lived here, did I look right straight in there or just at you? Okay, I lived here 7 years.
7 years. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Oklahoma, but I moved here from Austin, Texas.
Whoa, Oklahoma's culturally super different.
Yeah, very different.
Were you born there?
I was born there, yeah.
Yeah? And why did you come to New York?
Because I moved out of Oklahoma because I was tired of Oklahoma. I moved to Austin, and I moved here from Austin because I realized I achieved all I could in Austin, which doesn't take that much.
Yeah?
So, yeah.
And how would you describe what you do?
What, here?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been just doing this. This is like the first job I got in New York, and I've been doing the same thing, but I do study some acting. So.
I was going to say, what do you do outside?
Yeah, outside of that.
So that classic New York. This is not even like an interesting, it's a cliche everywhere you go. Someone's got other stuff going on, which is kind of cool, right? Kind of cool. How hard is it to get acting jobs here?
I mean, I'm studying, so I have not. I'm the baby at that, so I haven't even tried to do that yet.
How hard do you think it's going to be?
It's going to be very hard. Yeah. I'm not going in there thinking that I'm going to like book something. Okay. I'm expecting it to be hard. All
right. So what I'm exploring today is like what people learn in New York, the difficult lessons that they have learned here specifically. Yeah. You got an answer for me?
Yes, I do actually. Is that you take the good in with the bad, because like. My first memory of when I first visited here was that I walked out of the subway and it was amazing. I smelled the best Chinese food, but I still smelled a whole immediate urine cloud. And that's kind of how it is, where it's like I can't get deterred by if I see something that's gonna shake me, because I'm always gonna see something that's gonna shake you. But it's just that's part of the experiences that you get.
But I love that as a metaphor. You smell the best Chinese food at the same time as you walk through a urine cloud. It's perfect. It's perfect. So I spent probably 10 to 11 years walking the streets of the Upper West Side. I didn't really want to live in this area. I couldn't have been further away from everybody that I knew who was in Brooklyn, creative industry kind of people. Don't make it sound like I'm posh in the comments. And I got to tell you, I've been walking around all day, and the newness that I was feeling earlier when I got off the train has kind of died. Because this area for me was grinding. Family stuff, shops, schedules, activities, driving kids to things. Love you, kids. My two magnificent human beings, as I'll refer to you from now on. And it's expensive, right? So I was super stoked earlier today, and now as it gets darker, and as I am reminded of the grind that it took to actually earn the money to be here, Hey, maybe I just need to live in Brooklyn. It's funny because I've just walked tens and tens of blocks and I've been reminded of how noisy New York is, and it does affect us. Like, there's research that shows that kids who grow up near airports, freeways, loud traffic, etc., their brains don't develop in the same way because their brains are trying to process the stress of their noise. In New York, you can find your peace. This is one of my favorite spots, generally speaking. That's the New York Public Library. Don't sleep on the libraries, kids. Yeah, you're going to get some eccentric characters, some eccentric smells, but libraries have books, and they're quiet, and they have free Wi-Fi. Sure, the toilets can look like they're a scene out of Alien, but don't sleep on the libraries, they're awesome. So if you're a New York parent, these playgrounds are heaven sent because everybody's living in small apartments, some with multiple families, some with a single family, but whatever. There's no space, people go insane. These playgrounds, super simple, heaven sent. This particular playground is very, very meaningful to me. My two wonderful human beings went to this school. They spent a lot of time in this playground. I nearly got into a fight with another dad in this playground. It's being rude to all the moms. I had a little word with him. He's like, "What you looking at, essay?" I'm like, "Bro, it's like 10 a.m. on a Thursday. Calm down, bad boy." So I got some stressful memories from this little playground. But one of the cool things about New York is there's a good soccer culture here. Soccer's really big. Not everyone sees it, and probably in the upper classes and various other classes they're playing baseball and lacrosse and basketball, etc. But soccer's really, really big. This playground had a lot of really amazing young kids come through. There's a guy who signed with the Red Bulls recently called Julian Cole. My guy was with MSC and had 6 years at the NYC Academy. They played Barcelona, Manchester United. He scored a goal against Liverpool. Definitely a proud dad moment. I was working at the time in Manhattan running a workshop for the Vayner company as well, but my boy scored and I was like, oh my God. Such an amazing moment. And here's the thing, those opportunities are why we moved to the city. We swapped the familiarity of Sydney for the opportunity of the USA. Having said that, you pay a price for it. You move here, you don't know anyone. I moved into companies as someone who was relatively young on management teams, so I'm not really like hanging out with a lot of people in the company. On the weekends, we're taking kids to soccer, and soccer's like a pretty intense job, or whatever activity it is. I think there's a book that's just come out about how the productivity drug that families have and are now attaching to sports is ruining families. It's destroying them because of all the stress and the expense. You have 2 kids or 3 kids doing weekend sport, that's your whole weekend. You got to drive, you got to pay for your car, you got to pay for the gas, you're arguing about who's picking whom up, etc., etc. Maybe the kids don't even want to play. So a lot of crazy dynamics happening in the US around sport because it's a very competitive country. Anyway, beautiful relationship with this playground. And I think one of the advantages that a lot of the kids had coming to this particular school is that this school has a playground. Not all schools in New York have playgrounds. And so when you look at a lot of the research around how to get good at sports, you need just structured time. And I think when they're young, I'm going to say it's maybe 5 to 6 hours a week. It's probably a little bit less when they're really, really young. But I think you need an equal amount or even more time in unstructured play. So playgrounds are amazing. ¿Qué quiero? Bueno, como eso, más corte aquí y menos trucos detrás. Un poco mullets, australiano mullets. Sí. Es hora de conseguir un corte de pelo. ¿Ah?
¿Cómo te llamas?
Mark. ¿Y tú?
Mark. Johan.
¿Y tú? Mucho gusto. ¿De dónde eres?
República Dominicana, Santo Domingo.
Sí. ¿Dembow o merengue?
Dembow y bachata.
Bachata, ok. ¿Ángel Dior o el Fafa? El Alfa.
El alfa.
Ah, So one thing you hear in New York is, have you got a guy, or I've got a guy. You want to get tattoos done, you want to get your HVAC sorted out, you want to get a haircut, someone will say, I've got a guy. I found that really strange until I experienced a few bad haircuts. And here's the thing, there's so many people here, right? And there's so many talented people here. I used to come and get my hair cut here all the time, probably for 6, 7, 8 years with my boy Ricky Fade. There's so many good people, so many talented people here, but because of the population, there's also so much mediocrity. The number of times you might get a haircut, and especially for me as like an older gringo, I like to get a 1, I used to get a half.
You want a big show inside?
No, alto, high fade, tight, high fade, the shape. Gracias. Me encanta la República Dominicana. No me gusta Punta Cana.
¿No te gusta Punta Cana?
No,
Es aburrido.
es aburrido para mí. Me gusta la ciudad. Es interesante. Yeah, so the thing with New York is the mediocrity. So you have to have a guy, right? Because there's so much choice here, there's so much mediocrity. You have to know what you want. So if you come and work here, if you come and partner here, you know, try to find love, you have to know what you want in a really specific way, or you can end up with a really shit haircut, okay? Which is not what I'm going to get right now. ¿Cuántos años pasaste aquí?
Tengo casi 8 años. 7 años acá.
¿Te gusta? ¿Yeah? Más o menos música aquí.
Sí, menos música.
No, sí. Dicen que la República Dominicana tiene mucho ruido. The noisiest country, right?
Lo que pasa es que
¿Es de verdad?
el dominicano es muy divertido y
¿Con sus
siempre
voces?
hay mucha música,
Sí.
mucha aventura.
Sí. El acento es interesante para mí porque es muy staccato, like, y muy rápido. ¿Sí? ¿Es de verdad?
Hablamos muy rápido.
¿Bachata o cumbia?
Bachata. La cumbia creo que es colombiana, ¿no? La cumbia creo que es colombiana, venezolana.
Ok. ¿Bachata o reggaeton? ¿Reggaeton? Aperísimo. Es dominicano, huh? It's funny, man. I got a hair transplant 18 months ago in Turkey. It's so nice having a haircut with a full head of hair. I'll tell you about that another time. Gotta get these bad boys done. When you get older, hair grows in weird ways. It grows where you don't want it to, and it doesn't grow where you want it to. Oh, I've done this trip thousands of times. How's it feel? Just gonna jump on the 1, which is a local, needs to take service stops, head down to 23rd Street, West 23rd Street. So we're gonna see our friend Jack Appleby. When I first moved here 14 years ago, call this train down to where we go later for my first job at Saatchi. It was May. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Oh, good weather, mate. And I was happy, I was excited, and I remember thinking, like, how long does this last? I was looking around, a lot of people were not so happy, everyone was a bit stern. I was happy, and I remember putting something on the internet about it, and my friend who lived in New York for over a decade, he goes, it lasts 6 months. He's not wrong. That's Jack. We'll be speaking to him soon. Looks like he took a hit in the head. It's 81. 1 minute 18 to go. He's coming in. He's looking sour. The team won. Let's crack a lacking, son. How are you, man? Yeah. You right? What happened? Get an elbow to the face or something?
if he's gonna hit me that hard, it's lucky that he got me here and not higher.
When did you move to New York?
I moved to New York on January 26th, 2020.
Why did you move here?
I took an agency job that was the hardest job of my life, and partially because they were a rough agency and partially because a global pandemic started 6 weeks later, and what agency knew how to work during first year work from home?
After how many weeks did you regret moving to New York?
I don't know if I ever even thought about it that way, just because like I've lived my life fairly solo for the last decade. So even though I had pals and stuff back home, for me it was just like going somewhere else wasn't really an option. Just like this is where I am, so just even leaving never really became something that came in my head.
Yeah. Why had you been living your life solo for 10 years?
Just typical family separation type stuff. Like see the world differently.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's. We're
literally tell me about it.
Literally tell
Give me some content. I will milk the content out of those basketball players.
It's one of those things where not all families seem to see the same way politically, and you'll see this in my content. Like I can be fairly liberal, which is totally fine by me. My family is not, and I'm not the type to push them away.
Yeah.
But they are the type to push me away. On top of a decade of other family issues that, just a lot of adult life trauma stuff. Like we had a big financial issue in our family due to a gambling addiction that kind of tore everybody apart. And some of them banded together and some of us went our separate ways. So it's been kind of solo for about a decade now.
Yeah, there's that concept they call grey rocking, where if you're dealing with a difficult person, often in the context of narcissism, but difficult people, you grey rock.
Oh, I haven't heard that one. That was new to me.
It's a new one, which means you just are and you don't really react.
Yeah,
right?
I learned.
Yeah.
It became like, because of like the situation I was raised in, like they were great parents when I was kids, just we struggled in adult life. But like because of that, like I became someone who's fascinated by communication and keeping your cool and understanding when and where to push back. And then I've also had times where like if you push me around, we'll fire back 10 times harder. It's a balance to try to figure out how to even handle things in general.
You know what happens? It doesn't usually get that much better. For some people it does, for some families it doesn't. As we get older, I think we become more of the weird things that we were when we were younger.
Sure.
It's just how it happens. So do you remember in 2020, you moved here, you lost your job, and then we went for a walk around Central Park. Do you remember what was on your mind that day? I want to sort of take people to that exact moment.
Yeah.
Because I actually think it's a moment that a lot of people at some point, either in their careers in New York or wherever they are, they're actually going to have to go through, which is like, I just moved here, it's super expensive. I came here with all these expectations and things didn't quite pan out, and now what do I do?
Yeah, I think one of like my biggest like life hacks has been, I'm just someone who will just ask people who I think are either admire or smarter than me. I'm like, what do you think I should do? And it doesn't mean I just immediately take everyone's advice, but like I love feedback. I love hearing how people got to places. And like you're somebody who I looked up to for a long time. Like, I think you know this, like I was never trained traditional in strategy. So I read a lot of your content and that's how I taught myself basically. But I remember, it sounded like you remember vividly. I remember that one of the big things we talked about was freelance life of all things. But I'm curious what your take was.
Well, I remember that you were getting people sniffing around you to do some of the work that I think you're doing now, which was about being independent, about building your own company.
Yeah.
And if someone has that vibe, I'm like, you have to do it.
Yeah, now I wish I had done it earlier.
Yeah.
Like, you and I met because of Twitter, and I had built this audience for myself, never with the intention of making money off it. It was always like, oh, it'll give me my next job. It impressed my clients. It got me some clients. But then you move across the country for one job that kind of breaks you, that then lays you off 6 months later. Like, you start looking at like what you want to do. I took one more career job, and the only reason I did that is because when I had announced to the world I was available, all these people asked me to work for them because I had built an audience, and where it was pretty clear then that would be my last job. And then we'd see what I had audience wise. And now I'm 3 years into having my own newsletter and media company, and a second media company now.
What do you think it was about corporate America that you struggled with?
What did I struggle with corporate America? For me, the quality of the work was always what was most important to me. And what's funny is part of what had helped me advance rapidly as strategy director was I'd actually developed a great rep for dealing with tough clients, which then became a self-fulfilling prophecy where I kept getting tough clients. When I'm doing my own thing with no red tape and I don't have to worry about the politics, even though I think I was fairly good at them, I can just make stuff that I know works. And I've been able to prove that over and over again. Like now like I said, I have 2 media companies now because I've known how to make content the whole time. I don't have to sell it to anybody except for me now.
But I think there is a little bit of a trick where this country and corporate America, even if you're in the creative industries, is actually very conservative. But you have to be here for a while and to have experienced other cultures and other countries to realize how conservative the creative industries are. You could work with someone and they wear kicks or sneakers to work and you're like, oh, they're like me. And then you realize that they're not like you. They're from intergenerational wealth. They're the sociopath of the company. They're going to run that company one day and you're like, oh, I didn't have to deal with that in my country. So there are definitely a few little unusual things here.
Yeah, and like my perspective is I was raised like the most basic suburban Riverside, California, like barely squeaked into my like basketball scholarship at a school that literally won 0 games my senior year of high school. So like for me, it was like, it's pretty like self-built from all that kind of stuff. So like my perspective is very like suburban American on things.
Yeah, but basketball, you were rated pretty highly in the state at one point, right?
When I was a kid. Yeah. I mean, I had the like...
Say the number. It's part of your story. Give me the story.
It's part of, I mean, 7th grade, I was on the #1 team in the nation.
Yeah.
I was playing with several of my teammates, played in the NBA, several of them won NBA championships. And I was being raised to be a pro basketball player. Like not from the like insane tiger parent type of way, but from the like, you love this sport, we're going to give you the tools to pursue it. And I was 6'5" as a high school sophomore, and that's a problem when I'm only 6'5" now. So it just wasn't big enough for that, but like still found a little college that was willing to give me a scholarship to play. Like I was absolutely one of the worst players on the team in college, but now I'm 36 and like still playing the game because like I just love it so much, and now it's become like media company #2 for me.
I reckon after 36, anytime you shoot the ball, there's a risk you might break both knees accidentally. Oh, the body shifts.
There are parts of my body that I didn't know could hurt, and now they hurt all the time.
I love it. So coming back to New York, what lessons have you learned in this city that have hurt you and maybe helped you?
I think one of the big things with New York, it's like it's such a Peter Pan land. It's such a playground. And I'm not somebody who, I think a lot of people come to New York and they really dive into that culture, like lots of drinking, lots of going out, lots of staying up late. I actually struggled because I didn't know how to do that kind of stuff. And I struggled socially. Like I moved here when I was, I think 31. Like I'm not 26 anymore.
Yeah, true. And
like I always say fighting the 30-year-olds in New York can feel quite hard sometimes. So I'm meeting agency folks.
I'm too fucking old for it.
And meanwhile, all my audience says I'm too old for them.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, you know,
you didn't deny it. What a trucker.
No, I mean, listen, agency culture is like, how much can you drink with your coworkers? And like, that's not how the agencies I grew up with were. And that's how the first New York agency was. It was a huge social club. There's some smart people who work there, but it was like, can you drink with your juniors was kind of the culture that I came into. And like, the answer was like, no. And like, that's not really who I am or who I've ever been. So like, one of my just finding like kinship in New York originally was tough. What's funny is now I tell people New York's the friendliest place in the world.
It is, but how have you found that kinship? Is it through basketball? Is it through...
It's through a lot of things.
Is it also just through starting a business? Because this country respects people who start businesses. Other countries can be a bit cynical. Like Australia and the UK, there's a bit of a cynicism in the culture there. Here, people are like, oh, you started a country. Here you started a country.
There you go.
Oh my God, it's literally what's going to happen this year in this country. People are going to start 10 more countries. But you started a business, and there's a different attitude towards you versus you're an employee.
There's undeniably like just having a business, like especially a business with an audience. Yeah. I can meet more people. I can get a hold of people I shouldn't be able to get a hold of. Yeah. Even that though, like that burned me a lot of ways too. Like I met a lot of people who like, but I'm nobody. Like I have less than 100,000 followers on every single social network.
I bet you know the exact number.
It's getting near 500,000 total. But no, I mean, I learned the hard way. What became tough for me was when I was at my loneliness. Like I stayed all through COVID. I was solo, have my own apartment, can't really make friends in a pandemic. Yeah. So you get lonely, you get a little desperate, and like any type of attention becomes the right type of attention. So like, was it people that weren't good for me? Was it relationships that weren't good for me? There was like in every version of them. So like for me, it was like a lot of work to just like enjoy myself as a person again, like get out of like the deep COVID isolation depression.
Okay.
Start getting brave again, trying to meet more people again, and then like trying to recognize who was trying to hang out for the right reasons.
Okay.
And a lot of it was basketball culture. A lot of it was like trying to find pursuing people that were also pursuing business.
Yeah.
Was definitely a big help there.
But you activated in various parts of your life kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
And this city does respond to energy like that.
Yeah.
So.
And the best part of New York, and like I had to get out of my head a little bit to like start pursuing this, but like in New York, anybody will grab a beer.
Yeah.
Like this city's really good for that because anybody can hop on a train at any point. Like
really?
It's easy to happen. Yeah.
That was not my experience, but I lived in the Upper West Side with 2 young kids at the age of 30.
Oh, I don't go above 30th.
Yeah, I
know.
know. Above 30th. Back
Unless
in my day, it was I don't go above 14th. Oh my God, these young people, they're getting cringier and cringier. It's now 30th. Who goes above 14th?
It's really 14th. I just didn't want to be too West Village pompous.
I already made jokes about that. Yeah, well, I mean, everyone I knew was in Brooklyn, right? And
Yeah.
On the Upper West Side, driving kids to sport all the time as a 32-year-old with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and not complaining, but it was super hard in management teams, super hard to like
Sure.
any social circle.
Yeah.
Because often working 60 to 80 hours a week as well, right?
Totally. I mean, and it's funny. I'm now working more than I worked at agencies just because I'm a one-man band still.
Yeah.
Like I've hired and fired and like tried all kinds of things. I'm working so much now, but like I also kind of realized you don't need that many people.
Yeah.
You need some people you love, some people you trust, some people like that you have like joint loyalty to. But like you don't need a colossal drinking circle to be happy. It turns out.
Sure. Give me one other like tough lesson that you learned.
As much fun as there is to have in New York, like the real challenge here is like finding yourself and figuring out who you want to be amongst it. Because like you really can be kind of anything here. Like the energy of New York is very real. But we talk about like the distraction era, the antisocial era. Like there are so many ways to not have to think in New York. And I had to really find a way to like make myself happy,